All right, thanks everybody for coming to learn about some T-shaped teams. So how many of you get everything done, every sprint, all the time? What's your secret? You're lying. Totally lying. Which of you who just raised your hands are totally lying? All right, we got some honesty here going on. So this is a challenge, right? How do we actually get stuff done every sprint? Now, there's no expectation to get everything done every sprint. Usually about 80% of the time we want to get everything done. Anyone hear that rule before? Rule of thumb, 80% of the time. Why is that? Anyone? Volunteers? You didn't realize this was the forced participation talk today?
Things change.
What's that?
Things change.
Things change, but not during a sprint, right? See, that was a trap. About 80% of the time we want to get everything done because we want the team to be able to stretch a little bit. If we get everything done 100% of the time, then we don't really know what our true capacity is. If we get nothing done all the time, then our managers are kind of wondering, what the heck are you guys doing down there? So anyway, one of the keys to getting 80% or getting everything done 80% of the time or better is T-shaped teams. So just quickly about me, my name's Dave Todaro, founder and CEO at a company called Ascendal. We're down on the first floor. Come check out what we have down there. We do this all day, every day, and we get paid for it. So we are a professional services firm. We do agile development all day, every day. Our clients pay us a lot of money, and they don't want to really hear, well, we didn't quite get it done, or it wasn't quite done right. They want to hear, we got it done right, and 80% of the time is pretty good because we tell them that we're pushing our teams to do even more. I'm also a master instructor at Caltech, like speaking to folks. I've traveled the world, talked to a lot of people about Agile, and who knows the definition of an expert? Raise hands, anyone? Definition of an expert. Oh.
Someone that knows it all.
Someone that knows it all. Close. Yes?
Someone who knows enough to know they don't know it all.
Someone who knows enough to know that they don't know it all. That's a better example. The definition I like is someone who's made every possible mistake in a narrow field. I haven't made all the mistakes yet, so I'm not quite an expert, but I have expertise because I've made a ton of them. So happy to share some of those lessons with you guys today. So I don't know if you guys are fans of the Scrum Guide, but this is what the Scrum Guide tells us. Scrum teams are cross-functional, meaning the members have all the skills necessary to create value each sprint. We're done, right? What's the problem? Why is that hard? It's just shove a bunch of people together and tell them to get stuff done, and it just magically works, right? No one ever kind of sits around wondering, like, what am I supposed to do now? They never dip down into the backlog for the next story. That never happens, right? Is that only with me? Only with our teams? You guys must be doing something right. Maybe you guys can give me a presentation a little bit later on. So this is the challenge. Scrum teams are cross-functional, and by design, the Scrum Guide is pretty vague, right? Scrum is super lightweight, doesn't tell you exactly how to do it. 16 pages or so in the PDF, you read that, and we figure it all out. Well, here's the problem. The framework that is super lightweight, which is designed to accommodate any of us, means that we need to figure the rest of it out. I've been working on figuring it out since about 2007. I wrote a 500-page book. Come downstairs and grab one tomorrow if you'd like. Happy to send you an electronic version. And I probably have another 300 pages of stuff that I've learned since I wrote that book 3 or 4 years ago. So it's really hard. Anyone hear that saying? Scrum is simple but not easy, right? And this is the problem. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about how to take this really simple concept and actually apply it in a way that gets the maximum amount of work done each sprint. All right, so here's your team. Bunch of superstars. And they have all the different skills necessary. Here's our cross-functional team, and a few of the skills we might have. We've got back-end developers, we've got front-end developers, mobile, QA. There might be some other specialties in there. UI, UX, might be some technical writers, might be some DevOps, might be data science, et cetera, AI these days. May have some AI folks. And we need to both leverage their expertise as well as support this idea of being a cross-functional team. And that can be a little bit tricky, especially because the organization that's around this tends to do this, right? It tends to segment these specialties. And so how do we take these segmented specialties and shove them together and make an effective team that's actually going to drive progress? Therein lies the rub. So this is what it looks like in a lot of organizations. We have the back-end engineering manager. And the back-end engineers, I apologize for those of you in the back, it's a little bit small, I'll read this off. The front-end engineering manager and the front-end engineers, you see where this is going. Mobile engineering manager and the QA manager. So we have this, what I call the HR organization, or the reporting structure in the organization. And what we would need to do is we need to slice across it. Right, so we slice across it to create our teams. But when we slice across those boundaries, we also kind of inherit some of this stuff. Right? We kind of inherit some of this segmentation. And our challenge is to figure out how do we battle this. Because this segmentation does not work. And here's why. We end up with these silos. So the back-end engineer says, well, I've got no more back-end stuff to do, I guess I'm done. Front-end engineer, hey, all the front-end stuff's done. I'm gonna, go get a beer with my buddies. In the meantime, the rest of the team's kind of hanging out, finishing the work of the sprint, et cetera, et cetera. So with this siloed specialization, we often ends up in sort of an extreme example with specialist teams. And I've seen this, how many people have seen a structure like this in either their companies or companies they've worked with, right? Does this feel agile? Does this feel like we have a cross-functional team? Not really, but what I think's happened is that we have organizations that are trying to figure this thing out, right? Trying to figure out this agile thing. We go from this waterfall approach where we have these highly specialized folks that are having these tasks divided up by our traditional project managers, and we have this organizational alignment which shoves them into these very cohesive sort of specialty organized groups, and then we end up with things like this. And then our clients come to us, and we also help our clients. We put teams together, but we also help our clients. And they say, why are things not working? I say, well, because you have a few problems with this approach. So there's a little bit of a cost involved, which is we have dependencies. And how many of you guys are doing SAFe? Raise your hands. A couple people. What do we do during PI planning? Shop dependencies, right? And try to eliminate the dependencies as much as possible. When we design our organization like this, we're actually designing in dependencies all the time. So the mobile team depends on the back-end team, and the front-end team depends on the back-end team. QA team depends on everybody. Right? How's that going to work? Thank you. It's actually a two-way dependency, right? Because the QA team needs to wait for the front-end stuff to be done. Front-end folks need to wait for the QA team to test, and we go back to them. And then what happens when they fix the bug? Goes back to the QA team to retest, and God forbid if it's still broken, right? And then you're in big trouble. And then the same thing with the mobile team. So we have all these dependencies, and it means that no one can actually do anything. So this grandiose idea of having this cross-functional team that can make a commitment in each sprint and actually deliver goes completely out the window. It's impossible to be agile in this environment, but all too often this is what we see. Sometimes it's not quite as extreme as this, but we do oftentimes get into component teams, which there's nothing wrong with component teams when done very carefully. But in some cases, when those components are used by everything all the time, you're introducing these same sort of dependencies. So you may not have exactly this structure, but this is a big gotcha to watch out for. And the symptom is we're waiting on that team. If you hear we're waiting on that team, then that means that that team that's waiting is at zero velocity at that moment. which is terrible, right? Agile is supposed to make us, what? More resilient, more able to accommodate change, faster, and at the end of the day, everyone being happier. Stakeholders are happy because we're producing things, and we're producing them at a high level of quality, on a predictable schedule that actually matches what our customers want. Ooh, that's crazy. And then the team members are happy because what do most technical team members want to do? They want to produce stuff that actually drives value, that people are going to use and are going to make those folks happy, those customers happy. So I like to say that our product isn't technology, our product is happiness. So what we do is to drive happiness into our team members, into our clients' team members, into the stakeholders at our client, and this is all sad face. So don't do that. Okay, great. Well, that sounds amazing and simple. So how do we solve this problem? Well, first, we should talk a little bit about some of the theory behind waterfall versus Scrum. You guys are here at an Agile conference. This is probably old news to you, but just in case, humor me for a minute. So this is the typical waterfall approach, right? We start with requirements, and then we do the design, we implement the architecture, then we implement some features on top of it, et cetera, et cetera. Finally get down here to UAT, which is when we figure out that we didn't actually build the right thing, and it was 2 years ago that we designed it, and then everyone wonders why this doesn't work, and lots of yelling and screaming. So what do we do with Scrum instead? We shove all of this together. So we smush everything together, and we do a little bit of everything all the time. How many people have heard that one before? Do a little bit of everything all the time. Awesome. I think I stole that from Mike Cohn. So we need to do this a little all the time, and then as we have the sprints go along, we're doing this over and over and over again. And not only sprint by sprint, but story by story. So how many of you have a cycle time of a story, start to finish, of less than one sprint? All right, everyone's hand should be going up now, right? Because if you can't get one story done in a sprint, then you're in big trouble. If you aren't getting a story done in a sprint, come see me after. I will help you. No charge. I will help you. All right, how many folks are at a cycle time? Let's just assume for a minute that we're talking a 2-week sprint, because I might say some things in days. Half a sprint or less for a story of cycle time. All right, that's pretty good. How many are, let's just call it 4 days or less? 3 days or less? 2 days or less? 1 day or less? All right, your stories are too small. What's that? Depends on the size of the story. Awesome. So on average, my recommendation is 2 to 3 days cycle time. So you're doing all of this in 2 to 3 days, which you guys are Agile folks, so it doesn't make your brains explode. This makes a lot of people's brains explode because they say, how the heck are we going to do that? How is that actually possible? And of course, the answer is T-shaped teams. So here's a little bit of a solution. We shove those specialties together. Now we're starting to get into that cross-functional team. So we have the back-end, front-end QA, back-end, front-end QA, maybe back-end mobile QA. Maybe these guys are focused more on the mobile area. On some teams, all the teams do a little bit of mobile, but in some organizations, one team's focused on the mobile or maybe a few. So here's the problem. We have user stories that have different levels of need. So again, it's a little bit small. But in the first story, we've got a little bit of front end, a lot of back end, quite a bit of QA. Next story, no front end. And then we've got quite a bit of back end and a lot of QA. And then in the last story, a little bit of front end, lots of back end, a lot of QA. So this is a little bit of a problem. And it can lead to some problems that exacerbate the issue, which we start getting into during sprint planning. How many of you during sprint planning try to level the specialties? Try to figure out, all right, well, we've got a lot of back-end work. Maybe we should pull in some stuff that has a lot of front-end work. Okay, good. You guys are awesome. Class dismissed. Perfect. This is great. All right, well, I had a bunch more slides, but now we can just hang out and drink water. So it's not always perfect. And a lot of times, a lot of teams, not you guys, a lot of teams try to level those specialties, which kind of flies in the face of the goal of the product backlog, which is to order by priority, business value, whatever it might be that's driving the order of the backlog, ruthlessly prioritizing that backlog. If we start going down the backlog as a team, and we pick story number 24 because there's no front-end work and we got our front-end guy who needs some stuff to do, it kind of blows up. Well, we shouldn't be doing story number 23. If we plan story 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, we should be sort of working on story 6, right? Well, story 6 doesn't have any front-end work. Well, okay, what are we going to do with the front-end guy? This is the problem. So, without the T-shaped team, we run into challenges with swarming. How many guys have heard of swarming before? Awesome. So swarming is basically the idea that the product owner has said, this is the number 1 story, this is the number 2 story. If I have, say, 5 stories in my sprint, we shouldn't all be jumping on number 5, we should all be jumping on number 1. Because, and this is part of the beauty of Scrum, we're acknowledging that we have risk. The risk is, we don't really know how long it's going to take to do all this stuff. So we should probably be focused on the highest priority, because if we don't quite get the last story done, it's probably better to get number 5 not quite done than number 1 not quite done. A lot of teams, again, not you guys, a lot of teams, 5 stories in a sprint, 5 developers, 1 developer per story. Great. I got number 1, I got number 2. The problem is what happens if number 2, 3, and 5 don't get done? Product owner is probably not overly excited, let's just say. But instead, what if we were able to actually work on maybe story 1, possibly number 2, and drive those completely to done before we moved on to number 3? What that does is it dramatically mitigates our risk in terms of working in the wrong order. So if we have stories that aren't quite getting done, 20% of the time, not quite getting everything done, which is fine, it should be the last story, or maybe the last couple of stories in a worst case scenario. So swarming is the idea of we're all going to swarm around the top priority story, then move down from there. If your developers are dividing and conquering, if you are starting every story in the first day of the sprint, reconsider. That would be my piece of advice on that. So, leading to stories not getting done, and this is a big one here. I ran out of stuff to do, so I went down in the backlog. And those of you who are product owners, okay, I'm going to take a deep breath. What the bleep are you doing? I don't want you down on the backlog. You guys committed to these 5 stories. One of them is done. There's 2 days left in the sprint. I don't understand what's going on. This is the inner dialogue that's happening in the product owner's head. Maybe what comes out of their mouth is, oh, that's interesting. So this is another part of the problem. The product owner wants the commitment to be done. This is what I need. Story number 23 is not important right now. I don't have anything to work on. Again, the product owner, okay, that's great. I'm going to go get a drink now at the bar. You guys figure this out. Drives product owners nuts and the rest of the organization. I don't have anything to work on. We have a backlog with 262 items on it. I don't understand what you're saying. It just does not compute. So this is what we want to drive forward. Now, we're not going to get rid of specialties. Everyone has a deep specialty, which I'll talk about in a minute. This is fine. Emily is the best person to do this work. What we don't want is Emily is the only person who can do this work. There's nothing wrong with playing favorites. Emily is amazeballs at this. If Emily is available right now, awesome. But what happens if Emily is sick? Or, God forbid, takes a vacation? Right? Are we just going to not do any of that work? I mean, this is a little bit of an extreme example, but this is sort of at the root of the problem that we see. This is what we need to avoid. So, the T-shaped team, what is this T of which you speak? So we've got the broad at the top and the deep at the bottom. And the idea here is that the deep is in a specific functional area, discipline, or specialty. And at the top is our ability to actually do other stuff. So my ability to work somewhere else other than my core area. And even though T-shaped teams is sort of in the lexicon, it's really more about the individuals being T-shaped. So if you combine a bunch of T-shaped people into a team, then you get a T-shaped team. Because teams, by default, are kind of T-shaped, right? Because they're cross-functional. We should be able to do everything that's required to actually deliver value. And that's how we combine our different specialties. Does this make sense to you guys? So seeing this, how many of you have teams comprised of T-shaped individuals? Some is good. Nice, it's a good percentage. How many of you look at this and wish you had teams comprised of T-shaped individuals? Awesome. So let me talk a little bit about, well, why do we want to do this? I've hit on a few of these things. So I talked about the ability to swarm. Risk management is a big one. So I talked a little bit about Emily being sick or being on vacation. The other thing, I mean, she may be here, but she's tied up. So what we end up with is, if we don't do this, we end up with not only, well, I talked earlier about the inter-team dependencies. Now we have dependencies inside the team, and that makes it extraordinarily difficult for us to deliver value. I talked a little bit about this one, attempts to level the work. This is just a natural outcome if you have those very specialized siloed teams, because we don't have enough work for X to do, and now we're trying to invent that work. And of course, we don't want to dip in the backlog. Now, my experience is something that's really at the heart of making this work. There's a critical success factor, and that is the attitude. So channeling the three musketeers here, all for one and one for all. Now, in some of the teams that we worked with, it's really no fault of their own, it's just kind of how they've grown. It's a little bit of the opposite of this, which is, this is my lane, and I'm going to stay in it. And when teams adopt this attitude, which is, what can I do to drive this sprint goal? What can I do to drive this sprint to done? Then we get dramatically better results. So this is the key attitude. If there are folks on your teams that simply cannot adopt this attitude, they should get off your team, or you should remove them. This is the attitude. Anyone ever hear attitude trumps aptitude? Totally works. So it starts here. It starts with the belief that we are a team. So I don't remember the Mia Hamm quote, but I exist for the team, I breathe for the team, I live for the team. Everyone needs to have that attitude. Now that Mia Hamm is a world-class soccer player, probably not all of our team members are going to be that level of mental discipline. But if we don't have this attitude, you're never going to go anywhere. So this is where it begins. The team needs to believe that this is the right approach. And this can be a big challenge. So what it looks like, and I'll talk a little bit here about some ideas of how to build these capabilities, but when it works, it's the back-end engineer runs out of back-end work to do and then asks one simple question. Anybody? What can I do? What can I do to help? Now, I've talked to teams that are really struggling with this, and they've said, well, there's nothing they can do to help. And this was back pre-COVID, and they were actually working together. I said, well, maybe they could go get pizza, because you guys are busting your butts. It's the night before the sprint. You guys have decided to stay late. You guys want to drive that last story to done. Sprint reviews tomorrow morning. I said, go get pizza. I said, what? I said, are you capable of ordering pizza and going and picking it up? Yeah. Team, would you like some pizza right now? Yes, we would definitely like pizza. Can you get some Coke too? And they went and picked up pizza. Usually back-end developers don't jump to, I'm going to go get some pizza. So this is how we can help with that thinking, right? What can help the team right now, including if it's pizza? Another great one is QA engineers testing away. Maybe they could use some help testing. Are developers capable of testing? Yes. Anyone who can read some sort of test plan and type some stuff and click some buttons are capable of testing. I love it when developers test, because guess what they're doing when they're testing? They're using the stuff that they built. And an amazing thing happens when developers actually use the stuff that they build. They get a lot more insight and a lot more empowered, which of course is what we want. And then they start coming up with questions and ideas. They're sitting there in backlog refinement and talking to the product owner and saying, hey, wouldn't it be better if we did it like this? Because I had this idea. Product owners, who are you? This is amazing, thank you. Now we're actually working as a team. Common fallacy, by the way, is the product owner solely responsible for building the product backlog? No. Who's responsible for the product backlog? The team. Right? A lot of people think, oh, it's the product owner. No, it's the team. Why? Because if you have one brain on the problem versus 7 to 9-ish brains on the problem, that's going to be a dramatic difference. Well, I have no idea about, well, wait a minute, if you test it a little bit more, then you get a little bit more insight into what we're actually doing. And now all of a sudden there's more engagement. So testing, perfect target. What about end user documentation? Now maybe your developers aren't the best writers in the world, but they could probably read it and see if it actually makes sense. So this is the sort of creative thinking that is sort of the polar opposite of, I don't have anything to work on, I'm going home, that's the really bad one, or I'm going to dip down into the backlog and start working on this other story. Do not do that, because we made a commitment as a team to drive this to done to the highest degree possible, to the best of our ability, and we're not done yet. So if we're not done, don't leave. Dipping down in the backlog is leaving. That's exactly the same as you guys pretending we're all in person again. We're all busting our butts at 6 o'clock on a Thursday night, and you're going home because I've got nothing left to do. Dipping down in the backlog, same thing. So it just doesn't work. Okay, so what are some of the techniques that we can do this? Because a lot of people say to me, all right, well, I've got a back-end engineer, how the heck can they learn something else? Because the back-end and front-end, that's another big target. Can a back-end developer write front-end code? They can. Her team does. What's that? Depends on the skill set. Wrong answer. Ooh, that microphone's loud. Sorry, I didn't mean to yell at you quite so loudly. I'm just joking with you. It's the wrong answer. I asked, are they capable of writing front-end code? The answer is yes, they're a programmer. Are they able to right now write front-end code? Depends on the skill set, right? We might need to give them some help. Sorry for yelling. So same thing, front-end developer, can they write back-end code? Yes. Are they capable of writing maybe good back-end code? Maybe not. So what can we do to help them out? Again, starts with the attitude. And one other thing, we don't expect the front-end developers to become expert back-end developers, and vice versa. That's probably outstripping, unless they just are super psyched about it, maybe they can become a super developer on the other end of the spectrum. This is also really important because how many amazing full-stack developers do you guys come across in everyday life, right? There's not a lot of them that are amazing across the full stack. So there's usually going to be a bias toward one or the other. Again, T-shaped. So that's another target beyond the easy stuff. Helping with testing, helping with proofreading documentation, getting a pizza. So here's some techniques. Pair programming, a good one. A lot of you are probably doing this right now. Mob programming, code reviews, reviewing each other's code, especially if it's not in your tier. So get your front-end folks starting to review the back-end code. Maybe they're not the sole reviewer, and you're hanging your hat on the front-end developer, making sure the back-end code looks good, but have them start looking at it. Have them start looking at those pull requests and understanding, okay, this is the new functionality that we did, and this is the code that got added for that functionality, and it starts to come together. Most of my coding background is on the back end. So kind of ASP.NET MVC was the furthest that I ended up going, being an individual contributor with my teams. Single page applications, not really my cup of tea. How do I learn it? I looked at pull requests and understood, okay, oh, that's interesting. That thing does this, and that's what I'm seeing in the UI. Awesome. So that's hugely, hugely valuable to do those code reviews. I love this one, fix a bug. What's great about fixing a bug is you're not synthesizing the code. You're not starting with a blank screen and having to write that code from scratch, which you just may not be capable of doing. But fixing a bug, stepping through that code, being forced to understand what it's doing, tweaking some things in a safe environment, that's a really, really good way to kind of get your fingers in there and get your hands dirty. So pair programming, I think all of us have heard about pair programming, probably have done it, but there's a little bit of a structure to it. I've got a Martin Fowler article at the end that talks about it. Did a little more research as part of this presentation, which was kind of fun to dig into this concept. The navigator and the driver. And in its purest form, this is what pair programming looks like. How many of your teams do pair programming all day, every day? This is old news.
I've seen that.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Seen it before. Awesome. How are you guys finding it's working out for the pair programming? Thumbs up. Does it help drive this idea of a T-shaped team? Does it help broaden the knowledge? Awesome. So all the pair programming guys are nodding and saying yes, so thumbs up for the pair programming idea. So I really like this one. The driver is actually not allowed to decide what to do in its purest form. Now, I'm not too much of a purist. I think that can kind of go back and forth. Oh, what if we did this? I can type something in, but this is the idea. The more experienced person is the one who's not at the keyboard. So they're kind of directing the less experienced person. Now, this can also work really well in terms of those experience with the other tier. So maybe we're going to do some back-end code. Front-end guy doesn't have anything to do. Guess what he's doing? Working with the back-end guy. Back-end guy, front-end guy, doing back-end coding. Okay, now type this, which is going to seem extraordinarily painful to the back-end guy. He's going to be like, oh my God, I wish I could just zip this in there. I'll be done in like 15 seconds. Well, you're not getting it done just for you right now. You're getting it done for the team. And this is an investment. So in this sort of purest form, and if we're talking about really low experience, what we're doing is we're investing in our team. We are making our team more cross-functional so that we can get better, faster, more resilient, more able to realize that promise that Scrum tells us that promised land, which is these teams can just drop anything in and they're like a paper shredder. Bzz. They just crank through it, doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter if it's back-end heavy, front-end heavy, blah, blah, blah. They just get it done. They get it done, it's amazing, it's predictable, and they get their commitments every sprint, or 80% of the time, meet their commitment. So this can work extraordinarily well. Again, you need to have that attitude, because the first thing about a half an hour in, when the back-end guy's pulling his hair out, with the brand new person to the back end is going to say, this is too slow. So as Scrum Masters, any Scrum Masters in the room? A few? All right. You got to encourage them. Stick with it, because this is not right now. This is for the future. Now, there may be times to do this. Maybe Thursday at 6 p.m., the night before the sprint review, is not the time to start trying this, but just think about layering it in and think about it as an investment. And if stakeholders ask, well, what are you guys doing? So we're improving so that we can serve you better. That's the explanation to the stakeholder. So another variation here is mob programming, which is now you got a bunch of people yapping at you and one driver. So it's a bunch of navigators. By the way, this works really well not only for driving the knowledge in terms of maybe a tier of the application you haven't been working on, but especially at the beginning of a project or beginning of a new area of a product. A lot of time, how many times have you said, well, the two most experienced guys, just let them kind of figure out this part? Anybody? All right, don't bug them. Well, instead of doing that, why don't we just get everybody on a screen share with one person driving? Now we're all building it together, and what else are we doing? We're learning about this new area. So anytime you're tackling new technology, new area of the product, new architectural pattern, new project, new module, anything new in the technical end of things, do some mob programming. Doesn't have to be all the time. Maybe for the first couple of half days, and maybe you just need to take a break, and I don't want to talk to these people all day long, every day. This drives an amazing amount of cross-functionality in terms of just knowledge about what's going on. Because the opposite, which is the two two people kind of establishing the patterns. Now we're going to figure everything out, and then we're just going to tell you. Well, now you're kind of in lecture mode, just like you guys are today. You're kind of nod off. Your eyes are getting a little glassy. What was that? What did you just say? So now you're in lecture mode as opposed to being there, being in the room where it happened for those Hamilton fans, right? You can actually see the genesis of that. One thing that, and maybe there's a combination of more junior and more senior folks. One thing that a lot of junior developers don't see is how the thinking actually happens from those senior guys, right? The most experienced folks have a way of thinking and a way of problem solving that most junior folks, they just don't know. And they've got two choices. They can either learn it the hard way, which is going to take them years, or they can learn almost in an apprenticeship style from those more senior developers. So even if you have the most amazing T-shaped team in the world right now, strongly encourage you guys to try mob programming. All right, so I've got a few resources here. I want to leave some time for questions here at the end. I've got a few resources here. Martin Fowler on pair programming, good read if you haven't read it in a while or if you've never read it. And these are all links. I'll upload the deck to Whova as a PDF, so these are all links. If you could probably take a picture and Google it if you wanted to be a little faster and not wait for me. Mob programming, and then this is a great tool called CoScreen. I have no interest in CoScreen. I don't get any kickback or anything. It's just a really interesting tool that actually allows you to share code screens and have multiple developers kind of contributing and jumping in and actually typing. So it's almost like when you're in a Google Doc and you're all kind of able to go in there and type. It's sort of like that idea, but for programming. So a pretty cool tool. So just one last thing here. We're down on level 1. I'll be hanging out there when I'm not attending other sessions. We've got some other folks down there. Also, this QR code, if you scan it, we have a bunch of sort of show specials. Sometimes I wish I sold products. You could have like the show special. We have a bunch of different products that we're offering for free, including value stream mapping, analyzing your process and giving you a sort of readout on your agile process, readout on your software engineering process. We have over 20 different presentations like this one that we can give privately to your team. Happy to do any of that. Just scan that QR code or go here and we'll connect. Just put your name and email address in there and we'll follow up. So the question was, we have people that are used to being in their comfort zone. How do we help them bust out of their comfort zone? And one idea that you guys use is the idea of maybe everyone can deploy to production. And the team, of course, has to support the other team members to actually drive that. So how do we solve that? Again, this kind of comes to the Scrum Masters. Most of us humans don't really like to get out of our comfort zone, right? How many of us say that we're going to go to the gym tomorrow morning, we're going to spring out of bed at 6 a.m. and we do it religiously? 1, we have 1 in the back. 2, you guys are amazing. 3, all right. I am not one of those people. So I swear up and down, 5:15 a.m., I'll be at the 6 a.m. session. I get there maybe 2 out of 3 times that I promise that stuff, I'll do that. So we as humans don't usually like to get out of our comfort zone and we need to be pushed. So some ideas. 1, the Scrum Master may not have enough intel and texture around what you guys are doing. So maybe the more senior folks on the team can help with that nudging. The other thing is I don't have any X to do, and X is sort of my comfort zone. Great, let's jump on a screen share. And maybe you just start by having them watch. Right, so the front end person runs out of stuff to do. Maybe just have them watch the back end person. And that can be sort of a low stress way to get in there. All right, second question. We got about 5 minutes left. Gotcha. So to say it back to you and make sure I get this right, one technique is to take a specific topic and do a deep dive. As an individual, do a deep dive in that area, learn a lot about it, and then switch to another one, do another deep dive in that area. Am I getting that right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. And then over time, you'll actually learn a lot more about a lot more things. And you'll probably still have sort of your natural comfort zone, right, which is this is my love, but you'll start learning and becoming more valuable to the team. Other questions? Yes. So the question is from our product owner. You spend a lot of time like this. From our product owner, how do you convince the managers of your specialists to allow them to spend time to get training? Well, I've got the smart answer, which is don't tell them. The real answer is you are a Scrum team. No one else can tell you how to do it. Part of cross-training is part of how to do it. What are you guys doing? Well, we're doing some cross-training. Why? Well, this is how to do it. What do you mean? Well, we need to get better. So we had a retrospective and we realized that we're not good enough. And one of the areas of opportunity was to get more training for our team members. So it may be challenging if you're trying to go and spend $1,500 on formal training for somebody. That might be a hurdle. Maybe just start within your team. Hey guys, we need to figure this out. We're going to self-organize, and we're going to figure out the more senior folks in whatever area are going to help the more junior folks, and we're going to spend some time. And you as a product owner, you actually are in a position of power, because you can work with the Scrum Masters and your developers and say, look guys, I want to carve out time for this. What do you guys think would be good? Is it a half a day a sprint, a day a sprint, 2 days a sprint? You know, what do I need to kind of relax a little bit in terms of what I'm asking you guys to do to support this? Because at the end of the day, the product owner's in charge of ROI, so every minute that team is spending is yours. That's the way I look at it, because you're representing the company who's investing to pay for this team. So you actually can support that by saying to you guys, look, let me back off a little bit. This is an investment. You could even put it on the product backlog. Cross-training for sprint 13. There it is, guys. It's a task or a chore, and let's actually plan it in. All right, last question, last 60 seconds here. Yeah, so if I've asked, how can I help, and it's crickets, no one's telling me what to do, first thing I say is let's go to the Scrum Master. You know, the Scrum Master should really be the orchestrator, helping to orchestrate everything. I think the low friction way is, can I watch? Whatever it is that's going on. We're testing this, we're load testing this, we're doing final acceptance testing this, product owners doing, can I just jump on a call and watch you? They might be like, that's kind of weird, but I just want to learn. That could be another thing that your team members could say. I just want to learn more. Who's going to say no to that? No, you can't possibly learn more and become more valuable to our team. Hey, I appreciate all you guys' time. I'll be downstairs. Thank you so much. Have a great day.